Hi there, and welcome to insideQuantum, the podcast telling the human stories behind the latest developments in quantum technologies. I'm Dr. Stephen Thompson, and as usual, I'll be your host for this episode. In previous episodes, we've talked about the details of various aspects of quantum technologies. We've talked about the algorithms that will perform quantum computing operations and discussed the hardware that quantum computers will be built from. But for quantum computers to really take off, we need more than that. We need not just the hardware and the software, but also the infrastructure and the surrounding ecosystems. Today's guest is playing a key role in creating this ecosystem. It's a pleasure to welcome Dr. Alba Cervera-Lierta, a senior researcher at the Barcelona Supercomputing Center and coordinator of the Quantum Spain project. Alba, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Hello, Stephen. Thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
So before we get on to discussing your role in the Quantum Spain project, let's first talk about your journey to this point, and let's go right back to the very beginning. What was it that first got you interested in quantum physics?
So I decided that I wanted to pursue a physics career, a physics bachelor, but because I was interested in astrophysics, in particle physics, this type of physics fields, let's say. But then at the middle of my bachelor, there was a subject in quantum information. So I was curious and attracted to that because I didn't know what does that mean, and it felt interesting. So I just took that course, and since then I just basically fell in love with quantum information. And I decided that I really wanted to pursue a career in this field. And in particular, anything related with quantum mechanics was interesting for me. So to me, it was like a kind of nice way to implement the quantum mechanical principles for something that has a real application, especially something that is developing so much in the recent years.
So you already knew very early on then in your bachelor's, this is something that you wanted to do for a career, not just for a few more years of study, but something you really wanted to work on for a long period of time.
Yeah, actually, the story it's the following. So I was the first generation of the Bologna plan, it was a change in the European plans at that time. It was, I think, 2009, 2008, so more or less. So I was the first generation that took that plan. And this subject appears from nowhere. So it didn't exist before. So that's why I took that, and we were like only 7 people at that time. Now it's more than 50 people, and there is not enough spaces for everyone that wants to take that course. So before that, I didn't know that this existed in the first place. But then once I discovered that, I just found that was something completely different as I was expecting in a physics career. And I thought that was a great opportunity to try something different. But at that time, quantum information, and in particular computation, was not as trendy as today. Mm-hmm. So when I finished my degree, I took a master's in particle physics, not in quantum information, but I was still thinking about quantum information. So that's why it was during my PhD that I started to specialize more in quantum computing and information. But it was just a coincidence that there was a professor working on that in my university, but there were no masters at the time, or a very few of them, and no subjects. There were no pieces of news that talk about quantum computing. There were no podcasts like this one. So it was really, really at the beginning of all this hype.
So what made you decide to do that for your PhD rather than continuing with particle physics? Was it just something that had captured your imagination and wouldn't let go, or was there some more practical reason that you thought perhaps a career in this might be more stable, more interesting, something like that?
Oh, definitely it was not because I was thinking that was more stable than any other thing, because to me it was a super new field. I didn't know that it existed, and until I was in the middle of my PhD, I just realized that this field comes from the 70s and before that, so it was an old field, but there were not such a hype, like the hype that we are witnessing these days. So it was not as trendy in that sense. So I really took that because I feel that was interesting, that quantum information in the end is a so broad and big field that has not only applications, but in the end, conceptually speaking, is a different way of treat with information. And that was very interesting. I didn't know that was possible to manipulate quantum mechanical systems at the individual level to transmit information, to compute in a completely different way, and that felt really novel, attractive to me, and it didn't seem that it was possible at all until the recent years. But when I started, it seems more mathematical, physical theories that were interesting, and that was all. So I'm really happy that I took that, because now we are witnessing a really big expansion and revolution with all of this.
Yeah, I think you certainly got into the field at the right time, given the, as you say, all the hype that we're seeing at the moment and the kind of rapid expansion of quantum information in so many different directions.
Yeah, definitely. So it was perfect timing.
Yeah. If you hadn't gone down this route, then what would you have done instead?
I'm not sure. Something that it was clear in my mind is to pursue a PhD. I didn't care about which field in particular. I liked all physics fields, to be honest. But I really wanted to do a PhD. So probably in particle physics or related subjects, because I really like particle physics, even nowadays. So even if I don't work on that actively, I still like it. So probably, yeah, PhD in particle physics or similar.
So at the moment then, you're a senior researcher working in the field of quantum information. Can you tell us a bit about what's the big picture goal of your field and your work in particular? How does your work fit into this bigger picture?
So as I was saying, when I started working in quantum information and computation, there was very little use of this technology. So of course there is a lot of theory done. There was a lot of experiments going on in labs, but there was not such relationship between theory and experiments beyond particular collaborations. So when at the middle of my PhD, it was announced by IBM that a quantum computer was in the cloud, will be in the cloud, so everybody can use it. And that changed completely the way that I was thinking about this field. And I think that it also happened with other people. And that make a big revolution in that sense. Because that means that quantum computers made the jump from an experimental setup to something that can be operational, to something that people from other fields can use without needing to have access to a lab, right? So to me, this is just the beginning of what's going on in this field. So this field was developed in the 80s, 90s. At the beginning of 2000, we start having the first big experiments, but still everything very experimental, very primordial in labs. And now it's making a huge step towards operation, to become operational, towards becoming and developing these infrastructures. Because now the technology is ready for this next level. So in that sense, this is precisely the field where I'm working on. So on one side, as a researcher, I'm working in near-term quantum algorithms, which means everything that can be run in current-term quantum computers, which unfortunately is not all kind of algorithms, but there are many things that we can do and try. And on the other side, also helping to develop the infrastructure necessary to boost all this ecosystem. So in the end, I'm working in a supercomputing center. And something that is happening in this HPC community, high-performance computing community, is until very recently, they were not investing in quantum computers because we already have the supercomputers. There is a lot of things to do with supercomputers. And they were working in this level of development, the level of offering all the infrastructure to the users to use the machine for different applications. And quantum computers were not there yet. But this is changing. So quantum computers now are ready for that. And that's why it has perfect sense that these supercomputing centers start acquiring these quantum computers and opening them to the public, to the users, in the same way as it's happening with supercomputers. So in that sense, I'm coordinating a project that is trying to do this thing for in the particular ecosystem of Spain, but also Europe, because very recently, 2 weeks before we are speaking right now, it was awarded as the first 6 European quantum computers in Europe. And one of them will be in Spain together with these other quantum computers, from the Quantum Spain project. So we will have 2 quantum computers in our center. And this, as I was saying, this has perfect sense in a supercomputing centers because we are the ones who acquire the technology and offer that to the users, while universities and also industry, of course, develop the technology. And once it's ready, they sell that to us.
It's a really interesting position to be in because, as I say, we've spoken in previous episodes to people working on the theory of quantum computers. We've spoken to a few experimenters working in labs, working with technology that could be used in computers. And we've spoken to people working in companies as well who are trying to sort of sell the applications of quantum computers. But we've never spoken yet to someone who's in this kind of middle realm of making them available to people, which I guess is the really important part. If no one can use a quantum computer, then they may as well not exist. So that's a really interesting place to be. So the current quantum computers are all quite small. You mentioned the IBM systems. I think they have, between 5 and 7 qubits for the publicly available ones. Are the computers that you're looking to have in your supercomputing center, will they be comparable to this, or will they be somewhat larger?
So first of all, the idea is different from what a company like IBM is trying to do, because in the end, any company that develops this technology, their goal is also to sell this technology and to improve it on one side, because if you want to sell good quantum computers, first you need to develop them. Mm-hmm. In our case, we are acquiring whatever is in the market and put that as a public service, because we are a public institution, offer that to the users for free in that sense. Mm-hmm. So we expect to have different kind of devices. It will depend. So we are now under a public procurement process. I'm not sure, maybe when this is on air, maybe it's already announced what will be the company that will install this quantum computer. But the idea is to start with a very small chips, so probably 5 qubits or so. And the idea is to start testing them, because it's not about only using these 5 qubits, which is something that is still, current state of the art, or more, even very simple state of the art. Mm-hmm. It's about how to operate these 5 qubits, in a sense that we need to decide how are we offering this service, how are we prioritizing the jobs that people are sending to us, how are we connecting this device with our supercomputer. Even though it's a proof of concept thing, because 5 qubits is a very simple experiment, we need to set up all the infrastructure and all the workflows necessary to operate the quantum computer together with the supercomputer, because that's how is this field evolving in the supercomputing point of view, which is how to operate these two kinds of computational paradigms all together. And for that, you need to develop a lot of workshops, task managers, and also some theory from computer science perspective of how to do that in practice. So that's why we will start with the small devices. But the idea is our project will take 3 years, and we will have an upgrade in the chip every 6 months. So we are taking the superconducting circuits technology, and the idea is we will install the dilution fridge and all the necessary equipment to control the quantum chips. But we will have an upgrade every 6 months with a bigger chip with bigger capabilities. That means more qubits, better coherence times, less crosstalk, etc. So the idea is end up this quantum spin project, probably in 20 qubits or more. Even though there are still not 100 qubits as some other companies, our goal is start playing with this technology, incorporate that into our infrastructures to be prepared for the future quantum computers. So we are not the ones, as I was saying, who develop the technology, but the ones who operate that. So we will, be ready and prepared to host any quantum computer in the future.
I see. So you're creating the blueprint, I guess, for how to make these available. And I guess this is, you say you can build on it and get bigger and bigger chips in the future, but I guess also other sort of supercomputing centers and other institutes can then sort of borrow the techniques that you're developing and the procedures that you're developing to also make quantum computers more available to researchers and companies and the public and so on. So in a sense, you're establishing the way that this will go out into the world and become a useful tool.
Yeah, definitely. And let me add that we are not, of course, the only ones that are trying to do this thing. Actually, so the idea is we are not competing against other supercomputing centers or not against any company, of course. So the idea is we take our role as a operational infrastructure, let's say, to put this at the level of a public service. But it's not clear how to do that, of course. I mean, it's very challenging how to operate a quantum computer in a very, efficient way, because it's not an experiment that I run a particular quantum circuit and that's it. I mean, I need to receive quantum circuits all the time, operate that, and this is obviously hard. And on top of that, we need to design all of this from a very high level. So the user doesn't care if there is a superconducting circuit quantum computer or a trap ion quantum computer or any other kind of technology. So that's why we really need to collaborate with other centers that are also trying to do this kind of effort. And that's why this Euro HPC joint undertaking call, which is the recent call that was awarded another quantum computer for Barcelona and also other places in Europe. Our idea with this call was to collaborate between all the centers that were awarded with this quantum computer to share our methodologies, to share our technology, because in the end we will have only one of them, but the idea is our software will also be compatible with other quantum computers and the other way around. So just to exchange what is the best way to host these kind of devices and share technology in the end.
Okay, I see. So you mentioned there are a couple of different challenges involved in realizing this goal. Is there any particular challenge that is the biggest obstacle, or is it a case of a lot of small problems that all need to be solved in order for this to work?
So I would say most of the challenges, I'm sure, will appear once we have the quantum computer on site and have to operate that. Because the main difference that I can identify with respect to any user that goes to IBM or to any other company that offers this service in the cloud is it's not the same using a quantum computer in the cloud than having a quantum computer in your center, in your facility, and having to operate that. Because that means you need to calibrate it, you need to deal with any possible problem that occurs with the machine or with the infrastructure in general or with your server or with many other things. And this is really hard. And not many people or companies have been able to do that. So I think it's also the testimony of what happens when you move from the lab to this kind of infrastructure, that if you can do that, if you can do this jump, that means that the technology was ready. So it was ready to go to this next level of TLR or similar, because that means that it can be operated by people that are not experimental, physicists working on the machine. And I'm sure that although we have a plan, of course, to deal with that, most of the problems and challenges will appear once we have the quantum computer on site. And I would say that besides, of course, the obvious challenges of keeping the device calibrated all the time and also managing all the jobs in order, to gain access to a recently calibrated device as soon as possible to a particular user and so on and so forth. I think that also all the workflows that we currently use for high-performance computing are completely different, and they don't think about quantum computing in any of their parts. So adapting these workflows so I can run an algorithm both in a GPU, in a CPU, and in a QPU will be a very challenging thing, but at the same time very exciting because we are mixing all kind of technologies.
I see. So let's talk maybe a little bit about your research work. So one of your research interests is what we can do with computers in what's called the noisy intermediate scale quantum era, the Nisk era. We've talked a little bit about this on some previous episodes, but for anyone who've missed it, could you maybe give us a brief summary of what the Nisk era means and what the current challenges actually are?
Yes, so Nisk era stands for noisy intermediate scale quantum computers, and this because current quantum computers, first of all, they are small in a sense that they are formed of a few qubits. That's why it's intermediate scale, because we don't have thousands of qubits. We only have 50 or as much, maybe 100 in the recent years, but very few of them. And then noisy because they are not perfect. They don't operate in a perfect regime, in a fault-tolerant regime that we say. And this because the qubits, of course, they are affected by noise, they are affected by the environment, by radiation, by different sources of noise. The fabrication procedure is not perfect also. So that means that every time that I want to run a particular quantum circuit, the result is not the one that I was expecting because this noise. So that's why they call them noisy And in the future, once we have enough qubits, we will have quantum error correction, which means that I transform these noisy qubits into logical qubits, so fault tolerance, and then I can run any possible algorithm. And the idea of Nisk is, okay, we don't have perfect quantum computers, we don't have big quantum computers, but can we do something interesting with this kind of devices? Because in the end, we are still controlling quantum mechanically individual atoms or individual circuits. So it's still pretty awesome, the kind of things that we can do. And the answer that most of us believe is yes, there is still room to some improvement and some quantum advantage within this Nisk regime, although it's still to be studied until which extent noisy intermediate scale quantum computers present any quantum advantage, because supercomputers are really, really hard to beat, as you can imagine. But there are still some proposals. And the most interesting proposals are precisely the ones that try to mix the best of the two worlds. So trying to run part of the circuit or part of the algorithm in a quantum computer and part of the algorithm in an HPC or in a classical computer in general. So it's really interesting to see how can we combine techniques from different kinds of computation in order to extract the most from our quantum computer.
That's really interesting. Can you give us any examples of the type of problem you could solve in this kind of hybrid way with a part classical and part quantum algorithm?
Yes, there are many examples. I will say that probably the first one that was proposed was the so-called variational quantum eigensolver, and the idea is quantum simulation in the end. So to understand what's going on in the microscopical level, so in the quantum mechanical level, at some point we will need quantum computers, because simulating quantum systems is exponentially hard with a classical computer, and that's why we are doing all of this in the end, or one of the main reasons. So the idea of this variational circuits, variational quantum eigensolver, is to compute some properties of a quantum system, to simulate the quantum system in our quantum computer, and to compute some of its properties using this hybrid approach. And in particular, it was applied for chemistry, so to obtain the ground state energy of a molecule. And this is interesting and this is important because these energies, these ground state energies, are closely related with activation energies of molecules. So it means if I will have this reaction or not. And these, of course, have many consequences in chemistry. And that goes from very basic quantum chemistry to development of materials or new reactions or new components, etc. And this is very simple, apparently. I mean, computationally speaking, maybe not so complicated process, but still it requires a lot of effort from a computational perspective of how can I encode the biggest molecule possible in my quantum circuit, how can I extract the most from the classical part of the simulation to obtain the best parameters of this circuit, and so on. And this is one of the main applications that people believe that Nisk devices will be useful for is quantum chemistry. And this is just one example, because you can use exactly the same way of thinking, but replacing the molecule model by a quantum machine learning model. And you are trying to obtain some minimum of some cost function that gives you the result of your machine learning model. And that has, as you can imagine, many applications, from scheduling to solve classification problems, or to obtain some knowledge from some quantum circuit system or material, and so on and so forth. And these are just two of the applications that people think about, but there are many, many more.
Yeah, it's definitely a really exciting time. I think from my side, the quantum simulation aspects of what we can do with these systems is really fascinating, because, as you say, the larger the system becomes, the more difficult it becomes to simulate classically. And then at a certain very small point, right, it's around about 20 to 24 qubits. At that point, you can no longer solve these things exactly on a classical computer. And it's kind of mind-blowing. We talk about these things scaling exponentially with system size, but when you actually try and run it yourself and you see the memory requirement of 19 qubits, 20, 21, we know it's exponential, but for some reason it wasn't until I really tried to run these things myself and I saw how big the memory cost gets, how fast, that I understood what exponential actually meant.
Yeah, it gets really, really bad. Yeah. At the same time, also all these classical computational scientists, they are improving their methods because all this push from quantum computers. So I guess that they don't want to accept that quantum computers are so close, and in reaction to that, they improve their methods, which is amazing, because that means that there is still a lot of room of improvements in supercomputation. So it's very exciting to see, different ways of thinking, how they combine in order to extract the most, and also, friendly speaking, fight against each other and see who is the one who runs the biggest simulation.
Yeah, as someone who's not directly involved with this, I've been finding it really interesting to see these papers coming out on Archive where you have some quantum computer achieve some new record and then 1 week later someone manages to beat it on a classical machine, and then they both kind of leapfrog each other for a little while. It's, as you say, it's been really interesting to see how classical algorithms have been forced to improve by the dawn of these new quantum machines as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So one of the other things that you mentioned on your website as one of your research interests is high-dimensional quantum computation. Can you tell us a bit about what that means and what it's useful for?
Yes, so when we talk about quantum computing, we normally use the term qubits, which are the main blocks of the quantum information. But qubits are actually the main blocks of binary quantum information. So that means that our quantum state, each of these qubits can be in two of quantum states, the 0 or the 1. Mm-hmm. But quantum mechanical systems are naturally high dimensional in a sense that there are more levels. It's not only the 0 and 1. There is all other energy levels. There are other possible configurations that you can call 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on and so forth. So the idea of high-dimensional quantum computation is precisely using these other levels to perform also quantum algorithms and computation, and also deal with the information in the end. And this is curious because traditionally, classical computation has always been developed in the binary regime, because I guess it was easier to build a transistor and in a binary level. Mm-hmm. Although there exist ternary classical computers that were built. I think it was during the 70s or so. At some point they become deprecated because everybody just fall for the binary ones. But this is still a universal model of computation. So nothing prevents you theoretically to do that. But in quantum, it seems like more easier in a sense that I already have a device that has all these levels. Actually, I have to fight in order to not use these other levels, because it's easy you excite the qubits to these other levels and you don't want that, and so on. So the idea of this high-dimensional quantum computing is to adapt, in my case, to try to adapt and extract the most, let's say, of each qubit, so d-dimensional system, to perform computation. And of course, you will not gain any exponential advantage of that if you compare that with qubits, but it's a matter of a prefactor. So instead of storing your information in a 2 to the power of whatever space, you are storing your information in some number like 3, 4, 5 to the power of that. So this prefactor at long term, I guess that it will not be super important, because if we have millions of qubits, we don't need that. But at short terms, especially, that we can only deal with a few qubits or a few qubits, I think that will be important. So it could be a nice way to explore another path in order to extract the most from this exponentially hard and big, space. And at the same time, from a quantum information perspective, there is a lot of interesting properties that arise from high-dimensional entanglement. And who knows, maybe there is one of these properties is important for quantum computation, and we don't know that yet. So I will also be interested on exploring this path.
Okay, so we've already discussed a bit about the Quantum Spain project and some of the large-scale goals. Can you tell us a little bit about your role in coordinating this project, and what is it you do on a daily basis, and are there any lessons that you've learned in managing a project like this?
Well, managing Quantum Spain has been like a big challenge in my career for obvious reasons, because it's a big project, of course, but on the other side, because I need to face the other part of science, which is not doing science itself, but actually, dealing with a project, managing a group of people, also, putting everything into perspective, so to see, what will be the goals of this project, what is the progress of this project, and many bureaucracy, as you can imagine. This is something important to learn, because we are funded by public funds. And it's really important to explain to everybody what are we doing, why are we doing this, and what is our progress. So this is something that you have to take into account when you are coordinating a project. So in this sense, Quantum Spain has been a really nice and also challenging path and project. I'm really happy that the government of Spain decided to bid with quantum computing, because actually we were funded by the Ministry of Economic Affairs and not the Ministry of Science. So Ministry of Science is developing other many interesting projects in quantum technologies, but the particular one of quantum computation, Quantum Spain, it's funded by this other ministry because they wanted to see this jump from the academia to industry to startups to offer this service to everyone that needs that. And it's really nice that they see the opportunity to do that, and they have this view of saying, okay, now it's time to do this thing. And this is that has been very exciting. And at the same time, I'm coordinating 27 institutions. At the moment, we are still 13, but it's expected that other 14 will join shortly. And it's really nice to see, different groups, how they work, what are the objectives, what are their infrastructures, because this is a project that goes to the full Spanish supercomputing network, so you can see other kinds of supercomputing infrastructures in Spain. And it's really nice that it's organized in a network manner. So everybody is in Quantum Spain right now, and everybody is trying to have to make this work. Because we understand this as an effort, as a country effort to put our technology at the front level. And this is very exciting. So my role, let's say day by day, is basically answering a lot of emails and also, having several meetings to see the progress in this project. But I'm also, that was particularly at the beginning, but now that I have more time, that the project is still ongoing after 1 year, I'm more focused on the research part because my role is double. So I'm coordinated, but I'm also doing research. So I also have the opportunity to work together with my group here at BSC in quantum algorithms. So something more technical.
Wow. So yeah, you're really coordinating a huge number of institutes and I guess also a huge number of people, presumably also.
Yeah, but to be honest, I'm not doing that alone, of course. So something that I also learned very quickly is how important it is to make a team of managers. So not only a coordinator, you also need a project manager, you need a dissemination officer, you need other coordinators of each of the packages of the project, because Quantum Spain goes beyond having the quantum computer. So we will acquire the quantum computer, we will operate that, but we are also doing research. For that, there are some people that are coordinating all these research efforts in many projects, sub-projects. Then we are also training a full generation of scientists. So our goal is also to provide material and also training to everybody that wants to learn more about quantum computing. And not only from a physical perspective, but especially from other backgrounds like computer scientists or chemists or any person that is interested in using this technology. So, of course, for coordinating all of this, you need a lot of people around you that will take some sub-coordination of every of these packages. So it's also nice to see, especially how everybody is trying to do their best. So you can see there is excitement with these kind of projects in quantum technology, because everybody sees that this is the future. This is a kind of revolution or maybe evolution of computation, and everybody wants to put their part in that.
So I guess on the subject then of putting together very large teams with people from different backgrounds and different expertise and so on, there is one question that I always like to ask every guest on this podcast, and that's that physics has historically been a field that has been dominated mainly by white cisgender men for a very, very long time. It feels like things are beginning to change, albeit too slowly, but it seems like some change is beginning to happen. So I'd like to ask, during your career, having worked in several different countries, have you seen attitudes towards diversity changing at all, either over the years or between the different countries you've worked in? And from your point of view now, as someone who's involved in coordinating a project, do you see that you are establishing a very diverse team of people?
So all these problems with the lack of diversity, especially in physics in general, in computer science also, of course in quantum computing much more. So as you go smaller and smaller in the subfields, it becomes more and more complicated. But the problem that I see is we need years to change that. And we need to start as soon as possible, of course, but it will take years to see the effect probably. So sometimes it's hard to to push some policies because you don't see any direct effect, but you still need to continue with that anyway. And the problem that, for instance, I face is creating a team of people that work in Quantum Spain, for instance. Of course, I don't decide everybody that works in Quantum Spain, only the ones that work here at BSc related with this project. But anyway, there are no candidates that are from other diversity backgrounds. So there are many, very, very few of them. And it's really hard to find them. But in some cases, they exist. In some cases, they don't feel maybe safe in this environment. So I'm not sure about that. And that's the point that we need to understand. And as a woman in science, I can see. So I never have faced any problem, at least not obvious, not in an obvious manner, by the fact that I'm a woman working in a field dominated by men. But I can see that sometimes it could be hard because I'm going to many meetings. I am the only woman there, and because I'm happy with my job, and everybody's very friendly and also always treat me with a lot of respect, so I never have any inconvenience with that. But I can see that it seems like this field is aggressive towards diversity, because if each time that I go to a meeting, I'm the only one from a different, that is not a white man, basically, I can understand that other people that feel more constrained or that feel not so comfortable with that, they withdraw and they say, okay, I don't want to be here because I don't feel safe. I don't see that I'm welcome because I'm always the only one. And it's hard, but so I think the ones that we arrive here, we need to stay, even though it could be hard, or at least make the biggest of our effort, although it's also sometimes unfair for us, but to stay, so everybody, in case someone else enters, they see you and they see there is at least someone different, so they can attract other ones and so on and so forth. But anyway, nothing of that will work if we don't change our minds from previous steps in education. So if physics degrees are still underrepresented, if not even a university, even before that, if in high school all girls don't want to do technology because they feel that they are not good enough for that, and so on and so forth, it will be really hard to arrive to this level and see some diversity. So it's something that we need to address as a society. And in my case, in the project that I'm coordinating, the effort that we are doing is, of course, making a lot of visibility as much as we can of people of different backgrounds, from our backgrounds and also personalities and ways of living, etc., from our field, just to show that we are humans and we are diverse and we are welcoming anybody that wants to come to our project. And something very simple sometimes that you can do is things like making some code of conduct in our internal chats, for instance, or each time that we organize a congress or a workshops, things like that are very small and probably, nothing will happen. So why you will do something like that? It's just to show that this will be a safe space to everybody that wants to join this effort now or in the future. So I think these small things are also important in the short term, but definitely the long term, we need to address that as a society. So
that's really encouraging to hear. And I think, as you say, making these small gestures, they cost nothing, right? They're very simple and easy. And if they communicate to people that they are welcome, that everyone is valued, then that seems like a huge win for very little cost. So why not at least do that? And then also, as you say, there are many other stages in the career pipeline where there are problems. But as you say, if you have a workforce from a bunch of diverse backgrounds, at least making sure that they are happy and comfortable and feel safe and valued enough to continue working in the field, that seems like a very valuable goal.
Exactly. Sometimes it's not only about the diversity itself of your team, but also just to show that this will be a safe space. Because if your team is apparently diverse, but then people are not comfortable, then it's not diverse at all, of course. So that's also very important.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, one final question to wrap up with then. If you could go back in time and give yourself just one piece of advice, what would it be?
Keep calm, like we said, because I get stressed very easily sometimes because I want to do everything quickly. I want to solve things as soon as possible because, of course, I'm excited to do all these things, but sometimes things takes time, especially if you want to do them properly. So it's better that you stop, take some breath, and do whatever you have to do step by step, even if that means that it will take a long time, because it's more important make things properly than make them quickly. So I would say that, like, Alba, don't worry, just take a breath. It will work out. You just need more time to do it, so it's fine.
That sounds like a really great piece of advice and a good way to finish this off. Okay, so if our audience would like to learn a little bit more about you, is there anywhere that they could find you, for example, on the internet or on social media, anywhere like that?
Yes, I'm using Twitter quite often. So my handler is Alba C-Lierta. And also, you can send me an email anytime you want. I mean, I'm happy to answer all emails, and my email address is at BSC-ES webpage, so you can find me also easily. And of course, regarding Quantum Spin Project, we also have a website in English and Spanish, so there is also a contact form from anybody that wants to learn more about this project.
Okay, perfect. We'll make sure to leave some links to those on our own website and wherever we distribute this podcast. So thank you very much, Dr. Alba Cervera-Lierta, for your time here today.
Thank you, Stephen. It was a pleasure to be here, and I hope that you enjoyed as much as me this podcast.
Absolutely. It was fantastic talking with you. Thank you also to the Unitary Fund for supporting this podcast. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing wherever you like to listen to your podcasts. It really helps us to get our guest stories out to as wide an audience as possible. I hope you'll join us again for our next episode, and until then, this has been Inside Quantum. I've been Dr. Stephen Thompson, and thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.